it's not rocket science what we need to be doing to take care of ourselves. It's like it's so clear, but between the saying and the doing is like this massive gap, and that's actually an integrity gap. And the longer that goes on, the worse we can feel about ourselves. And so recognizing that, like, yeah, self-care, nobody's going to give you credit for it. It's going to probably mean drawing some boundaries, which is going to affect your relationships, either at work or at home. And it's because it's about claiming back that time that you need in order to take care of yourself.
Welcome to Spark Joy, the podcast dedicated to celebrating the KonMari method and the transformative power of surrounding yourself with joy and letting go of all the rest. With your hosts and certified KonMari consultants, Kristen Ivy and Karen Sochi. And now, here's the show.
Once you've tidied your home, you have the space, both physically and emotionally, to explore other areas of your life, especially ones that spark joy. One of those areas is health and wellness. Beyond the home, there is health. So today we're going to turn our focus toward another Eastern philosophy that we find intriguing. Brodie Welch is a licensed acupuncturist, board-certified herbalist, Chinese medicine expert, holistic health coach, and self-care strategist. She's the founder of Life and Balance Acupuncture in Corvallis, Oregon, where she has been treating patients since 2003. Brodie's helped thousands of clients with a regular body-mind practice and leads self-care boot camp programs, helping women actually do what they know they should do in order to take care of themselves. She's also the creator and host of A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world. Welcome to Spark Joy, Brodie.
Welcome, Brodie.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
You've been treating patients for over 14 years now, and you use a variety of modalities found in Chinese medicine tradition. How did you find yourself headed down that path?
Well, it was not a linear path at all. I went to college thinking that I wanted to be an activist and change the world all at once. And so a few years into that direction, realizing that that was going to set me up for a life of conflict that I wasn't going to enjoy, I found myself kind of desperate. Like, what am I going to do now? But I'd always been told that I had a healing touch. And so I went to massage therapy school at night while just working a day job and trying to figure things out. And in massage therapy school, I took a shiatsu class, and that's based in the philosophy of Chinese medicine, this idea that the body is made of energy and that energy moves around the body on these channels that we call meridians, and that everything in nature is mirrored in our bodies as well, that there's the body, mind, spirit, all connected, and that there's this sophisticated framework of understanding how all those pieces fit together. And so that was from Chinese medicine. And I realized that I was in love and I needed to learn more. So I went directly on to get my master's in Oriental medicine, which is the degree program. Very unpolitically correct, but that's the name of it. And basically learned everything that I could about this complete system of healthcare that's been on the planet for thousands of years.
It seems very interesting to me what you just said about this idea that you wanted to be an activist, but then you decided that that was going to set you up for a life of conflict. I also have been really interested in activism since I was a relatively young junior high kid and got interested in politics. But I also found that I feel that I've made a bigger difference doing what I'm doing one person at a time, as opposed to, all of the angst that's involved in trying to change the world. So I think I can totally identify with that. And I think that that's really a very neat way of stating kind of how you came about this, how you started down this path.
Yeah, it's an interesting synergy, and I still want to change the world. And I still think that working with people one-on-one in clinic it's too slow, frankly. I mean, and especially when health problems that individuals are having are connected with these broader social issues and cultural issues and values. So if we as a culture reduce human dignity to basically, like, if we feel like humans should basically be machines overriding what their bodies and souls want all day long, that's not good for people's health. And if that's the pervading cultural mindset, and that's what gets people promotions and social accolades and like, oh, you're so busy, you must be amazing, that there's no incentive for people to stop running themselves into the ground in an attempt to kind of be quote unquote successful.
Right.
And so like, just that's what I was seeing with women, especially for whom there is this disproportionate amount of second shift work that people are having to do if they're for socialized to be caregivers. And we're also working at that. There is so many women were coming in with these complaints like hormone imbalances and PMS and menopausal symptoms and digestive issues and anxiety and depression and sleep stuff and really, you name it. It can all come back to trying to do too much and really feeling like, okay, this is not just that you're not alone here in your struggle. And I just wanted to for everyone to know, first of all, we can opt out of this mindset culturally. We can do it differently, but a lot of times that makes you kind of a radical. And if you are, and really, since we get our beliefs and our habits from the people around us, from our environment, it's very much that it's not the kind of thing where you can just decide, oh, I'm going to just believe this and live differently. If your whole environment isn't conducive to that, it's really, really hard to stay in that new mindset.
For me, I feel as though a lot of times we compare our insides to everyone else's outsides. And if we see people around us hurrying around and being busy and we perceive that to be successful, then there's this whole thing of what's wrong with me that this does not feel good or healthy, or that I'm experiencing all of these secondary symptoms because everyone else seems to be doing this just fine.
Yeah, you know? Right. Or my favorite is everybody else can eat everything they want and they don't feel like the joint pain after eating sugar. And I'm like, yeah, they do. Right. They're just not talking about it. Or they're so totally checked out of their relationship with themselves that they're not even registering it. But no, like we all are dealing with the same stuff. Right. And it's just not necessarily part of mainstream dialogue.
Right. And self-care is a major theme in your work. It seems like we talk a lot about self-care, but I'm not sure that we really understand what exactly that means. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll start with what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean numbing out after a long day, binge watching Netflix or having that third glass of wine or, the entire bag of cookies. Like that isn't really truly self-care. It might feel good in the moment. It might feel like an indulgence or a treat, but really if it's not connecting us to our own vitality, it's not self-care. It's certainly not a freaking pedicure. Okay. I love going and having a spa day. I love taking care of my toes, but it's the empty calories of self-care and the idea that like all women need to have a different relationship with stress and to feel like we're finally at the center of our own lives is to get our toes painted is fundamentally flawed and problematic. So I would say that self-care really is about it's the yin to the yang of life. So if the yang of our lives is what we're putting energy into, so something that has to do with our purpose or our dharma or our values or our self-actualization, the things that we do, self-care ultimately is what's going to put back and enable all that doing to happen. And it's what all of the major experts agree we need to be doing for our health, and what the sages and yogis have known for millennia are essential for things like insight and clarity and deeper purpose. So I'm going to include the basic habits of self-care are going to include getting enough sleep, eating a whole foods diet that you can digest, that's right for your constitution and your body and your lifestyle. It's going to include some mind-body practice or mindfulness practice, meditation, whether that's seated or in motion. It's going to include self-massage to move your energy. And it's going to include having a relationship with your emotions and with your mind that allows those energies to move through us freely without perceiving everything as stressful or an emergency, which causes energy to stagnate. And I'm going to even include self-compassion in that, like how we talk to ourselves can be a form of self-care. And so, yeah, and there's definitely more, but those are typically what I consider the core competencies of self-care, that if you're not doing these things, you've got a piece missing.
I love how you summarize that, and you're echoing what I'm hearing lately, which is how some folks out there, at least, are veering away from the trendy term of self-care to really focusing on what it really means. I saw an article recently, and we'll link it in the show notes. I think the title was something like, self-care is not all like chocolates and bath bubbles. It's beyond that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's coming home and looking at a spreadsheet with your budget on it and trying to figure out your finances. Or sometimes it's tidying, which can also be a little bit uncomfortable, or trying and working through a new diet or a nutrition program. And sometimes those things aren't really relaxing necessarily, but they're helping you grow and develop.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say exercise is also a part of self-care, not necessarily relaxing, but it's something that if you do that, it enables everything else to go better. It enables everything, it fills up the well. And so, it's taking care of your finances while uncomfortable. You need to do it if you want to be in good shape, ultimately.
Exactly.
And so it's tending to those things that nobody's going to praise when you vacuum under the bed. It's the kind of thing that it matters for your environment, but it's not sexy. It doesn't show up as productive. When you get 8 hours of sleep and you feel great on the inside, nobody's going to be like, nice job, way to go. I bet it was really hard to actually put yourself to bed on time, considering your to-do list. That was massive.
Right.
But it is.
Well, I'm very interested in the idea of curing something by using self-care techniques. Have you experienced that with your patients, where you prescribe self-care to cure whatever is ailing them?
Yeah, all the time, every day.
I want to know more.
What can't it do, right? I mean, basically, if you need an ER, self-care is not going to cut it. But for pretty much everything else, I think it's helpful to step up for a moment into the Chinese medicine view of health as not this binary of you're either healthy or you're not, but instead thinking about it as a spectrum where health is on one end and there's this zone of imbalance in the middle. And then there's a symptom or a disease on the other end. And so let's say, for example, that you are experiencing back pain. It probably didn't start with back pain. It probably, especially if it's, you could have gotten in a car accident or something like that. But if it's the kind of neck and shoulder pain, low back pain that comes from our daily lives, our bodies are sending us messages all the time, like get up and move, stretch. And if you heed the warning of this feels a little tight, I'm going to move and breathe and see if I can get it to loosen up. That's that stitch in time that's going to save 9, right? That's treating preventatively, because you're treating at the level of an imbalance instead of letting it get to an actual problem like pain or not being able to move your head, or, having your back get tighter and tighter. The energy stagnates in that area. Suddenly, you slip a disc or something catastrophic happens. So usually if we're tuned into our bodies, they're giving us signals that we are entering that imbalance zone. And before something that we would consider a disease manifests. So a lot of us experience, when you go to an acupuncturist, for example, we ask you the 10,000 questions. And so really we want to know about not only why you're there, but all the other things going on in the ecosystem that is you, so that we can put those pieces together from our framework in a way that makes sense and that gives us a clue as to what that underlying imbalance is that's giving rise to all the different symptoms. So typically, you could have symptoms showing up that don't seem to connect at all to you. Like, what does my digestive system have to do with my focus and memory? Like, that might not make sense to you, but to a Chinese medicine person, it's the same system. It's the spleen stomach that we need to be dealing with for both of those things. And so it's a way that because we have this different way of looking at the body and the mind and its unity, and looking at everything that's going on in the person's life, we're able to make smart self-care recommendations about what they could be doing differently. And that's really where, for me, the focus of my work has been realizing that, people don't need a differential diagnosis. Most of the time, they just need tools to take care of themselves, and first and foremost, that feeling like they have the right to use them. And so that's kind of where I got away from or I've been moving away from treating people one-on-one to bringing people, women especially, together in these evolutionary groups where we can really evolve our habits. And actually, like most of us, it's not rocket science what we need to be doing to take care of ourselves. It's like, it's so clear. But between the saying and the doing is like this massive gap. And that's actually an integrity gap. And the longer that goes on, the worse we can feel about ourselves. And so recognizing that, like, yeah, self-care, nobody's going to give you credit for it. People, it's going to probably mean drawing some boundaries, which is going to affect your relationships, either at work or at home. And it's because it's about claiming back that time that you need in order to take care of yourself. And yet the things that you do every day, from the foods that you eat to how you move your body, to your relationship with stress and your belief system, to how supportive the people in your environment are, or whether or not your job gives back to you, how much sleep you get, all these things have such a profound effect on how you end up feeling, like more so than any practitioner can do for you in any office visit.
This idea of integrity being really at the base of some of these issues really resonates with me. I think that's really a great way of looking at it. In our work, we are very home focused. We think a lot about the home environments of our clients. And for our clients, a lot of times, that is really the center of where their stress and anxiety and unrest comes from. Do your clients, see this also? Do you feel that home environments are a big contributing factor to a person's sense of dis-ease?
Well, absolutely. If you don't feel like your home is a place where you can relax, then you're basically constantly in a state of stress. And stress is at the root of upwards of 80 to 90%, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, of everything that people will seek medical attention for. So the ability to unwind and relax is absolutely critical. And having an environment that's conducive to that, it just makes sense, right? And there's that feng shui idea too, that the energy of our environment affects how we feel. And so paying attention to how we feel in different spaces in our homes is key. And that gets to the unspoken agreements that we have with the people in our lives about whose job it is to do what, and that making sure that those are clear and transparent, but also that we can use our environments to enable our habits to be the healthy ones that we choose, or the ones that choose us, because we're not creatures of willpower, right? And at the end of a long day, despite your good intentions to do some yoga or take a bath or that kind of thing after dinner, if you have to move 3 boxes to get out your yoga mat, you're probably going to be less likely to do that. And if you don't have the space to do yoga in the first place because there's stuff all over your floor, again, you're not going to have the willpower to follow through on that good intention. And that's a way that our environment can actually undermine us or support us, depending on how consciously or unconsciously it's designed.
Well, I will say, Brodie, I have cleared my space pretty well, post-tidying, post-KonMari, and I've started to focus a lot more on health. Like you were saying, there's literally nothing in my way, right? There's no more worries with my home environment. And now I can turn the attention back on myself. And so what I've been doing is exploring different methods of just managing some chronic health issues that I have. And so I've looked into acupuncture, but I really don't know where to start in terms of really jumping into it. I'd love to talk more about your virtual programs, but for those who need, someone to actually poke them in person and start the process locally, I imagine they would be stuck like I am and trying to figure out like, what's a good practitioner? How do I find the right one? Or is it painful? All those questions that I have. So if you could help me kind of figure this out.
Sure, absolutely. So the first step in picking a qualified Chinese medicine practitioner is to recognize that acupuncture is a tool. It's not a system. Chinese medicine is the system. So I actually used to teach acupuncture as a technique to doctors and chiropractors in weekend workshops all around the country. And because in some states, you don't have to be an acupuncturist to sling needles. You can be an MD with 100 hours of training or 0 training, or a chiropractor with, or a PT or somebody like that who's had one tiny fraction of the education that an acupuncturist has, right? So would you want to see the person who's had 1,000 hours of clinical training and a 3,000-hour program, or would you want to see the person who's taken a few weekend workshops? And is basically like, yeah, whatever about the theory, just give me the points. And that was sort of the attitude that I felt like there was this, I had this reverence for Chinese medicine and all of its depth and philosophy and how much it can do. And to see it reduced to this punchline of like, and I was idealistic. I was feeling like, well, if somebody's going to get their neck adjusted, wouldn't it be great for that chiropractor to also, like, they already know anatomy. How hard would it be to know where to put a needle that would also help that person's neck? They'll got so much more mileage out of the treatment. But what a lot of times ended up happening was sort of this disrespect for the depth and like just kind of that almost an ego thing of like, well, I should be able to do everything, and I recognize like patients are better served when we stick to what we're best at and we refer out to the other experts. Yes. So I'm not going to try to adjust somebody's neck. If they need a chiropractor, I'm going to refer to a chiropractor. If they need lab tests, I'm going to send them to a naturopath. But if they need to understand themselves as an energy being, if they need like the effects of acupuncture, powerful anti-inflammatory. So really great for any kind of pain, both emotional pain and physical pain. In fact, in Canada, their equivalent of the AMA, their like Physicians Association or whatever, recommends acupuncture as a first line treatment for depression. Wow. Like that's barely news here. Like we're taught to think in a pharmaceuticals are the only answer sort of way in this country. If you've got symptoms that you suspect tie together, like if you're dealing with menstrual stuff and digestive stuff and sleep stuff, and it all sort of is stress related, or it's all sort, like that, or things that tend to come together in a whole suite of symptoms that may not seem related to you, but you suspect they might be connected, an acupuncturist is absolutely the person you should be talking to. So just know that there are these different levels of training, and you can find somebody who's nationally certified in Oriental medicine. So that's the nccaom.org is the website where you can look up by zip code, find a practitioner who's either been trained in acupuncture or Chinese herbs, or the title Oriental medicine encompasses both acupuncture, Chinese herbs, and biomedicine, or kind of that Western medicine. And so that's sort of the highest level of certification that you can find kind of nationwide. And then of course states vary. For example, if I were licensed in New Mexico, I would be a doctor of Oriental medicine. But because I practice in Oregon, the state's title is licensed acupuncturist. I have the exact same training as those people in New Mexico, so things like that are just to be aware of, that the titles can vary state by state. But like anything, there's going to be people who are amazing at what they do. And there's going to be people who just barely graduated from school and are phoning it in. Sure. And so the best way to find a good practitioner of any sort is going to be word of mouth, and or calling up the person and asking if they if you can speak to the practitioner, because there's going to be part of it is what they bring to the table. Part of it is going to be like their depth of knowledge in because it's a 3,000-year-old plus system of medicine. And so if you stop training in school, like there's a lot. You can spend a lifetime in just like any specialty within Chinese medicine and not know it all. So does the person know their stuff? Do you feel comfortable with this person? Because the relationship you have with him or her is going to be a huge factor in whether or not you get better. Because if you're not comfortable talking about all these dimensions of life, the person doesn't have all the information. And so really, like, just somebody you trust.
That's a great tip there. Yeah, I'm very big on bedside manner when it comes to doctors. I have really some very quickly if I don't get a good feeling.
Yeah, good job. You are the consumer, so that is within your right. And you asked earlier, like, does it hurt? And I want to clarify that, because people, I can't even tell you how many times people would say, oh, well, I'd be open to acupuncture, but I'm afraid of needles, or I don't like needles. Like, can you name one person who does like needles? It's like, maybe we've got that friend with lots of tattoos. Okay, maybe her, but like aside from her, no, like none of us think that sounds like a great idea. So let me just demystify that a little bit. If you can imagine, like, when you say the word needle, probably what comes to mind is a hypodermic, because those are what we all have experience with, like giving blood or getting shots. And those are hollow. An acupuncture needle is solid because it doesn't need to put anything into your body or take anything out of your body. And about 40 of them can fit inside of one hypodermic needle. So really what we're talking about is this tiny little hair-like flexible filament that just gets tapped in, and you may or may not even feel the initial insertion. But you do want to feel something. You do want to feel a little bit of electricity, kind of like a light switch going on, or a little zing is how I describe it to my patients, which is, and when you feel that zing, you know that the needle is not just hanging out inertly in your system, but it's actually making contact with your bioelectricity or your body's intelligence, which is quite electrical. And so it will feel like, whoa, yeah, there's something there. And some points speak very loudly and other points are very subtle. And obviously, like if you needle into a very tight muscle, it might be more sensitive than into a place that's totally open and supple and relaxed. But typically, even if there is a moment of, woo, what's going on there, that sensation mellows out and most people are so relaxed that they're able to go to sleep on the table. It's profoundly relaxing, and it works on our endocannabinoid system. So like our endogenous feel-good chemicals that are similar to morphine and similar to marijuana. So like this idea that you're like, actually people come out of treatments and they're a little spacey.
I can definitely attest to this because I've had acupuncture treatments for years and years, and I've probably had, I don't know, a couple thousand needles in me at some point. And I have to tell you that I don't think it just doesn't hurt. It just does not hurt. So that's just like, it does sound really scary when you think about it, but Brodie's correct. The needle is so different than anything you would think of as a needle. It's just not even an issue.
And it's really just a cultural bias, what we think of as weird or acceptable, that like, how weird is it to be basically put into a near-death sort of a state, cut open, have parts of us removed, new things put in, sewn back up and brought back to life. Like, that's weird. So yeah, getting a few little energy points, kind of like keys on a keyboard, or if you were a musical instrument, somebody's playing a chord on your body. It's just resonance. It's vibration.
Well, you've definitely not scared me away, so I will still investigate it. It's interesting when you have chronic pain, you actually have a high threshold for pain that you've built up.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, it's so good for chronic pain. Like, do not wait. Get me to an acupuncturist.
Yeah, I think that might be the next step. I've tried chiropractor care in the past, but I don't know. I didn't feel like it was totally for me, or if I felt like sometimes it's almost never ending. Probably how some people feel about tidying, actually. I used to feel that about chiropractor services. So is that kind of how acupuncture is, where it's like there's a short-term and then a long-term strategy, or is there, I mean, I guess it would vary per patient, but is there kind of an end to the treatment?
Yeah, there absolutely is. But there is, typically, I liken it to learning how to speak a language, or similar to chiropractic. It's like you might feel better, or after a massage, you might feel better after one session, but likely that problem is going to keep coming back unless you really teach the body to do something differently. And really, it's a process of re-educating and repatterning. And so, like speaking a language, you'll usually pick up a few words the first time you hear it, and then the next time you hear it, you'll pick up a little bit more, and pretty soon you're fluent and you really get what's going on. And so usually in my practice, I find that usually around visit number 4 or so is where that fluency kicks in, where maybe the person isn't necessarily noticing a ton of change, or they're feeling good for a couple days, but then their pain is back. And usually at about treatment number 4 is where, or 5, or, depending on how long it's been going on and what you're doing to exacerbate it in your daily life or whatever else, or and that there is a point where it really starts to melt, and where really progress starts to be made. And for most people, anytime acupuncture is studied, usually it's like 10 or 12 treatments is considered a course of treatment. And really it's just about like maximum benefit is where we stop seeing improvement from the treatments. And at that point, it's usually, a lot of times the condition could fully resolve, or it could enable a much higher quality of life than the person would be experiencing otherwise. A reduction in pain, greater range of motion, however you're measuring that. And at that point, you get to, well, in my practice, I like to make people as independent from me as possible. So teaching them as much that they can be doing on their own to keep their progress while they lengthen their orbit around their acupuncture treatments. And I usually recommend that, because you use your body, it's a good idea to take care of it. And because acupuncture is so good at treating preventatively, I usually do encourage people to find an orbit that works for them, whether that's quarterly or once a month, or if you have a chronic condition, then every couple of weeks. But that definitely varies person to person. And there is definitely such a thing as full resolution where it never needs any reminding, especially if that was like from an accident or an injury, where, once the body gets how to heal itself, it's reminded that it's not quite done healing this injury. And then there's no real need to keep doing it.
Yeah, I like that full resolution. I like that. I'm going to shoot for that for sure. Well,
until proven otherwise, why not?
Well, Brodie, I know you have a lot of virtual communities going on and additional community support that will only enhance any practice that's happening locally. So could you tell us a little bit more about your boot camp programs and other good stuff you've got going on?
Absolutely. So just for that same reason that I was mentioning earlier, that it's really hard to stick to your good self-care intentions. I work with a lot of women who are super smart and high achievers, and they would leave my office all fired up to really start meditating this time, or really start their new exercise routine, or their new diet plan, or their new whatever it is. And they'd be great for a little while, and then life would happen and they would find themselves bumped down off the top of their to-do list, and it just wouldn't be happening. And so I realized I needed a different container. And so I started creating this, basically groups of people, women, mainly women, all women at the moment, to really support people for long enough for a new habit to stick. So I'm actually taking people on journeys that last an entire year or 11 weeks. So 11 weeks is like long enough to change. If you're heading due north out at sea and you decide to like change the direction that your boat is heading by just a few degrees, then you keep going in that same direction, you end up in a very different place than you were aiming at originally. And 11 weeks or 12 weeks is just long enough to shift that compass direction. So people get massive results in whatever it is that they're aiming at, in terms of that bridging that gap between knowing what they should be doing and actually doing it. But a lot of times there's backsliding. And so that's why I let people basically do the program. People who sign up with me for an entire year get to do the program 3 times throughout the course of the year for less than the investment of just 1.5 of the course or so, thereabouts. And so it's called Level Up Your Life. And it's really, the kind of results that I get is everything from people feeling calm and confident to their better self-expression. Decluttering usually happens automatically. People drop weight, people sleep better, pain levels go down, people have more energy. It's incredible what happens when we start taking care of ourselves and doing all the things that we know we should be. It feels amazing. And so creating that space for dynamic, active transformation into the person that we're becoming next, it's what I get super excited about. So if you're ready for a major shift, I'd love to hop on the phone with you. So if you go to brodiewelch.com, you can apply for a time on my calendar where we can see if you're a good fit.
I like what you just said about the person that you are becoming, because that's really kind of a very key principle in KonMari. In our work, we see not only our clients begin to embrace better standards of health for themselves, but they also often seek to create a healthier home environment and bring more peace and contentment into their homes. What tips do you have, Brodie, on how people can do that? How can people bring more relaxation and peace and just general well-being and health into their home environments?
Well, I would encourage people to have their environment reflect their highest values and to give themselves permission to be in all the rooms of their environment, not just if you're me, their home office, for example, to be able to use their space and to be able to recognize that just like the different dimensions of our lives, the different spaces in our environment can bring out different pieces of us. And if we're only in the same rooms over and over again, that there might be a neglected part of ourselves. And so just giving yourself permission to have a present day inner dialogue with your not only your body, but also with your heart, and just being in tune with what brings you joy and what brings you relaxation and what does your body need in any given moment, and having your environment be conducive as much as possible to the things that are most important to you. And to make sure that the people around you are people that you care about, and that those relationships have free flowing energy between them, because that's also super important.
I think there's definitely a thread between KonMari and the traditional Chinese practices that you talked about today, Brodie, and I realized what the connection was. It's all about not just treating the symptoms, but digging a little bit deeper and connecting to what really is causing the problems. I think that's something that we both kind of have in common with our practices. So that's really cool. So one last question for you. We ask all of our guests this question. What sparks joy for you today?
Watching people transform, hands down. Cool. I am so inspired by people doing things differently, and that's really how we do fulfill our potential and become the people that we were born to be. And it starts with really small shifts, right? It starts with going to bed early. It starts with eating food that we can digest. It starts with taking a risk. These little things. And I'm inspired every time one of my group members has a tiny little shift, because I know it's going to take her in a massively new direction the more that becomes the new normal.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on Spark Joy today, Brodie. We loved having you, and thanks for all the great advice.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Brodie. You can find more information about Brodie and her practice at brodiewelch.com, and that's BRODIEWELCH.com, and follow her on Facebook at Brodie Welch, LAC.
Brodie has provided Spark Joy listeners with resources that will help you embrace a healthier way of living that sparks joy. You can find a Right to Take Care of Yourself Manifesto, a Calm and Centered bundle, and a free 5-minute breathing meditation, all linked in our show notes for this episode. So now we want to hear from you. Tell us your burning tidying questions or share stories about how KonMari has impacted your life.
You can find us at sparkjoypodcast.com and click Ask Spark Joy to leave a question or comment for a chance to be featured on next week's show.
While you're there, sign up to join our Spark Joy podcast community and get notified when each episode airs.
You can also join the Spark Joy podcast community on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the handle @SparkJoyPodcast.
Thanks for tuning in, and we hope your day sparks joy.
Thank you for listening to Spark Joy with your host, Kristen Ivy of For the Love of Tidy in Chicago, and Karen Sochi of the Serene Home in New York City. Spark Joy, the podcast, is not endorsed by or affiliated with KonMari Media Incorporated. The opinions expressed on this episode represent the views of the co-hosts and guests alone and do not represent the corporate position of KonMari Media Incorporated or the KonMari consultant community.